The New York Mets were dealt a devastating blow on Tuesday as Ronny Mauricio is out with a torn ACL. How will they go about replacing him in the lineup this upcoming season? I'll break it all down on today's edition of Locked On Mets.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. You also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Now, Ronny Mauricio might be out for the season. He has a torn ACL. Mauricio was playing the Dominican Winter League, where he was tearing the cover off the ball. And I believe it was Sunday night. He was trying to steal second base, ends up stopping shortly after making his jump, grabs his knee, has to be helped off the field, was sent to New York today for test, and sure enough, torn ACL. This feels all too similar to Edwin Diaz last year, where you lose a Mets star. Well, okay, maybe I'm going a little too far calling Mauricio a star right now, but you lose a guy that was supposed to contribute in a big way in the upcoming season, who, goes down in a game that essentially is an exhibition game. Now, the Dominican Winter League is a competitive league. Don't get me wrong, but it doesn't mean anything to the New York Mets. And he's gone. There's a chance you get Mauricio back. I don't want to count him out, but the typical timeline for an ACL, especially for a position player, looking at maybe a 9-month timeline, which would put him at the middle of September. Best case scenario, maybe August, and that's an 8-month timetable. And you got to realize, too, this is not, the Edwin Diaz injury of last year. That was a patella, not an ACL. But more importantly, Edwin Diaz is a pitcher and a closer at that. So, if the Mets were in the hunt last year, Edwin would have made a return. Okay, he was throwing off the mound. But in a lost season, they said it's not worth the risk. And they didn't want him to field his position, honestly. So they didn't want Edwin Diaz to field his position, and that's the pitcher spot. You're going to want Ronny Mauricio to play some shortstop or to play third base or second base, where he's got to make all these quick cuts and, really leave his feet sometimes off of that rehab knee. Is he going to be able to steal bases and run out of the box? It takes some time to really trust yourself. I mean, Ronald Acuna Jr., his entire 2022 season, he did not trust that knee. 2023, he won an MVP and stole, 70 bases. So he was fully healthy, but it takes that time to get there. To think that Ronny Mauricio is going to come back and provide a spark in September, it's being pretty optimistic. I mean, there's a chance. I wouldn't rule it out, but I think you have to go into this situation the same way we went into last season with Diaz and just say, he's probably out for the year. Now, that has drastic consequences for the Mets because David Stearns came out early this offseason and said they liked their options internally at third base. I think everyone took that quote to mean that it was kind of an open competition between Brett Baty and Ronny Mauricio, and Mark Vientos on the fringe of that. We're not really sure if Vientos can handle the position at the big league level. So you sort of thought, all right, Mauricio, Baty, these guys will go into camp and we'll see who wins the job. And I think Mauricio had a really good shot at it. Now, I have been one of the lone supporters on Baty Island. I still believe in Brett Baty as a player more than I believe in Mauricio and Vientos. I know I'm probably, fairly alone with that opinion based on everyone just seeing one awful year from Brett Baty and thinking that he's just a complete bust at this point. But I look back and I recognize what Baty was as a prospect. And I think there's still a chance he can turn things around. But now that's a lot of pressure you're putting on his shoulders again. Obviously, he's got the open runway to the starting third base position, but what's your fallback right now? Mark Vientos and Joey Wendell? It's not a lot of great options you have right now. Whereas with Mauricio, you at least thought, all right, here's a guy with high upside. I always pointed to the fact that even though he was thrilling to watch, and at times we felt like he was the second best rookie on the team last year, the Francisco Alvarez, and he probably was. And I feel like court of public opinion has them in that order. It's Alvarez, and then you have Mauricio down here, and then somewhere below you have Vientos and Baty. Beatty might have the lowest stock amongst the fan base right now, honestly, because his year was just that bad. But Mauricio is a guy that has star potential. He posts those ridiculous exit velocities. He can steal bases. And honestly, I've always looked at Mauricio and thought this guy could be a great super utility player for the Mets for years to come. I've sort of viewed him as the 10th starter on a team, right? A guy that, can play second, short, and third. If Francisco Lindor went down, I would have felt a lot better with Ronny Mauricio being the starting shortstop than Joey Wendell. Same thing with Jeff McNeil at second base. And also obviously being able to vie for playing time at third. I've also, called Ronny Mauricio right field Ronnie since I saw him play back in Double-A because I just thought his build and his tools would profile well out there. He didn't take to the outfield great in his first little tryout there this past season, but I still think he can add that to his game and really be a guy that, could always fill in wherever you need somebody. It will be kind of a Jeff McNeil with a higher ceiling but a much lower floor, if that makes sense, right? A guy that can, really wow you with the tools, but also has maybe a little more holes in his swing. But the whole goal of this season, while the Mets are going to try to compete, and we'll talk about how they can in the next couple segments here, this year's about learning what you have. And so, more importantly than anything else, whether it's who's starting at third base, second base, regardless of all of it, this was a year to see what you had in the kids, to see what you had in Mauricio and Beatty and Vientos, give all of them enough run where you could make an honest assessment about which of them is a fixture moving forward. And now you just lost a year to be able to see that. Now this guy's got to come back from an injury when the picture is going to be completely different for him in a year. We don't know who's going to debut for the Mets next season, and maybe grab some of that playing time. Also, Ronny Mauricio is a guy that I felt like probably had more trade value at the time than Beatty or Vientos had, just because, the tools sort of jump off the screen a little bit more. That card has been removed from your toolkit now. So this is just a really devastating injury on all fronts. And moving forward, trying to figure out what they do, it's tough because there's some internal solutions, but none of them are really great options. That's what I want to discuss next. What do the Mets have internally to sort of fill the void of Ronny Mauricio? What's their team look like now that he's potentially out for the year? We'll go through all that in just a minute. First, though, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Score this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. It's $150 if your team wins. If you're thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. We got the college football playoffs still going on. You got the NFL season winding down, and the NBA season's in full swing. The season always really ramps up when you get to Christmas, and we're about there. So this is the time to join FanDuel. The app, so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including the spread, player props, over-unders, and more. And again, when you place that winning $5 money line bet, you get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. Now, if we're looking at internal options to fill the void that is left by Ronny Mauricio, it starts with the guys we were just spending a lot of time on, Brett Beatty and Mark Vientos. Now it's a competition between the two of them for the starting third base job in spring training, and Joey Wendell is sort of your fallback plan at the moment. And, again, I'm high on Brett Beatty. Doesn't feel like anybody else is at this point, but I don't forget what he was in 2022. A guy that hit 312 in Double-A, had a 406 on base and a 544 slug. He had a 160 weighted runs created plus that season. That was 60% better than your league average hitter. He was the best hitter in that league. He hit 19 home runs in 89 games, really corrected all of the problems that he had, to his game in 2021, and then got a call up to AAA and eventually to the big leagues. Now, last year, he looked amazing in spring training. The Mets did not give him the job out of camp, sent him to AAA, tore the cover off the ball. They handed the keys to him, and it didn't work out. He just was not good last year. I think he got in his head. I think it was a lot of a just bad team rubbing off on him, right? If Brett Beatty had joined, a 2022 Mets where there was good vibes all around, I feel like you would have got a better rookie season out of him. But joining that clubhouse where so much pressure was being put on these guys, where they were just constantly pushing a boulder uphill, I think that really just crushed the guy's ego. Now, the question is, can he get that back? Does he have any alpha in him to really grab the third base job and not let go of it? I hope so. And again, he's the guy that was at the top of all the top 100 lists. It was not Mark Vientos and it was not Francisco. Well, actually, excuse me, it was Francisco Alvarez. It was not Mark Vientos and it was not Ronny Mauricio. It was, Beatty and Alvarez. I mean, there was a conversation between which of these guys was the better prospect going into last season. And I'll even own that I had Brett Beatty as a top prospect in the Mets system going into last year because I thought he had the higher floor, and that floor just dropped out from under him. But I'm still holding out hope that he can grab that job. But I also think he might have to shield him from left-handed pitching to really get him comfortable. Maybe give him a year where he's primarily facing righties. And in that case, Mark Vientos platooning with him, it makes a lot of sense. The problem, though, is let's just run through that scenario. So your lineup against a lefty. Right now, you're going to have a left-handed bat in there somewhere because, it's Alvarez behind the dish, obviously Alonso, McNeil, Lindor. Let's say it's Vientos at third. Your outfield currently would have to be DJ Stewart, Brandon Nimmo, and Starling Marte because you don't have any other outfielders. Now, the Mets have shown some interest in Michael A. Taylor. That's been reported throughout the offseason and came up again today. I think he'd be the perfect fit on this team. I really do. He's a great defender. He's sort of a high-end fourth outfielder, but he hit over 21, or he hit 21. I was going to hit over 20 home runs. He had exactly 21 home runs with the Twins last year, and he became their starting center fielder when Byron Buxton couldn't play the field anymore. So Michael A. Taylor makes a lot of sense. He also crushes left-handed pitching. This last year, he had a 914 OPS against lefties. His OPS against righties was 641. So if you sort of platoon him in the outfield with DJ Stewart, I think that makes a lot of sense. He gives you some insurance on Nimmo in center field and also insurance on Marte and right. So I really like the Michael A. Taylor addition. It allows you to really keep McNeil in the infield and then also frees McNeil up to give you some coverage at third base because you look at the help coming in the minor leagues, there's no other third baseman to look at here. I mean, yes, you could maybe see Luis Angel Acuna or Jet Williams trying to play the position, but I think both of them profile as sort of elite defensive second baseman because they're shortstops that I think, their range would play really well at second, their arm, everything else. They would be excellent at second base. Third base, I think it'd be a little bit of a stretch for them. So I believe that what you could do to start the season is sort of give the keys to Beatty and Vientos and Wendell. If that wasn't working out, you could shift McNeil over to third, and hopefully one of those two guys in Acuna or Williams is, earning a promotion to the big leagues. And you slide them in as your starting second baseman. You can roll with that. So I think they do have a lot of coverage at second base, which means McNeil might have to cover more third, but he hasn't even played much third. Now, he graded out great there in 2019. That was the most he ever played the position in a season. But he really struggled in 2020, and they haven't gone back to him in the last couple of years. He's played 6 innings of third base since 2020, the last couple of years. He just has not been playing there. So with all that said, I really think you are at a point where, Beatty and Vientos maybe have high ceilings, but the floor is just awful. Joey Wendell maybe has a high floor because he's a good defender, but not a lot there in the bat that you like. So when I really look at the options for the Mets internally, I think there's a gaping hole now at third base, honestly. I think they have to get someone that could possibly take over the position. And ideally, it's someone that can, be your DH as well, can fill multiple needs, but get a good bat that can slot in. And if Beatty and Vientos can't handle the position, you move them over and you put that free agent acquisition at third base every day. Maybe Vientos is the one that is hitting, and he becomes your DH. Like maybe Vientos isn't handling the position defensively, but it's hitting really well. He becomes the DH, and then that free agent can go into third, and you can roll from there. So I think the Mets have to address their position player core a lot more than we thought they would because Mauricio just had the ability to fill so many different roles. And now you take that away, and while they have Joey Wendell to be the backup shortstop, they don't have a lot else covered. I don't think you want Joey Wendell being your starting second baseman if Jeff McNeil has to play a corner outfield spot. You don't want to be your starting third baseman if Beatty can't handle it. So who are the best external options the Mets should sign this offseason? Really, I think all roads lead to one player. It's one Mets fans are very familiar with. It's the time finally here for a Justin Turner reunion. I'll break that all down in the final segment. If you don't want to miss out on any of the latest Mets news this offseason, make sure you become a Locked On Mets insider. This is our texting service where you can get updates from me anytime some story breaks. There's a big rumor I want to discuss, or if I just have a hot take, you can also communicate back and forth with me. So you can leave any comments or questions. I'm always looking to respond. I appreciate all the everydayers I've gotten to know through subtext. If you want to join today, find a link in the episode description. Go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. All right, so I laid it out. Justin Turner is the free agent the Mets should sign this offseason because at this point, the alternatives are just not great. You have Gio Urshela, who you could go to, and he's probably the best of the bad options. Really good defender. Did hit 299 last year, but doesn't bring a lot of power in his bat. Kind of empty calorie stats, a lot of singles. He did bat 373 against lefties. So again, if that's the fallback, I'm not entirely mad at it, but just not a great option. You have Evan Longoria, who seems to be past his prime. Same thing goes with Josh Donaldson. And honestly, Eduardo Escobar, but at least he'd be good for the clubhouse. Don't think that they sign him, though. You have Brian Anderson, who outside of a couple good months, really hasn't been good since 2020. Elvis Andrus, Ahmed Rosario, and Isaiah Kiner-Falefa are guys that could play second, but that's sort of blocking your top prospects that are sort of waiting in the wings, and that's moving McNeil off the position. Same thing could be said about Tim Anderson, although that would maybe be the highest upside option. I just don't know if that is the ideal fit. So again, all roads lead back to Justin Turner. Now, he still rakes. Okay, he's hit at least 270 or above in every season since his last year with the Mets in 2013. That year, he hit 280, but he didn't slug much. Didn't get on base at a great clip, 319. And so the Mets infamously cut him. Since then, he's put up like borderline Hall of Fame numbers. Doesn't have the career to do it. But if you just look at what he did with the Dodgers, like he was ridiculously good. Hall of Fame, obviously a stretch. He's not going to make the Hall of Fame. I want to make that clear. But like you look at the collective numbers he put up, he is like one of the greatest Dodgers in franchise history. Guy has had an unbelievable career since leaving the Mets. He has posted at least a 350 on base percentage in pretty much every season. His slugs generally around 450. So he's a consistent 800 OPS guy. Last year, he finished with exactly an 800 OPS. And in his last 10 seasons, there was only 1 year where he finished below that 800 OPS, and that was in 2022 with the Dodgers, his last year there. So he just turned 39 years old. He crushed his lefties last year, 900 OPS against left-handed pitching. So he fits as a platoon partner for Beatty at third. Obviously, he would get a lot of run at DH. And, you look at the Mets lineup, let's just say it's Brandon Nimmo. Maybe you put Lindor in the 2-hole, Alonso 3. I'd love it if Francisco Alvarez could be the cleanup hitter for this team. But if you want to mix up left, right, I don't know, McNeil. You have Alvarez and Turner. Like Justin Turner's at least a top 6 hitter on this team. And it might even be top 5. Like you might go into next year and still think that Turner is going to be better than Francisco Alvarez. So he's an ideal fit. And as much as it would take away some playing time from Mark Vientos, I think you can figure that out, right? If there's 12 starts a week, if you play 6 games at third base and DH, you can give Brett Beatty 4 starts. You can give Vientos 3 starts, and have him come off the bench. As the same thing goes with Beatty, where they could get some pinch hit opportunities. And Justin Turner could have 5 of those games. He's also a little bit older, so you can even split that playing time, down the middle between the 3 of them. 4 starts between those 2 positions, and just see who the hot hand is to play whoever that is more. I think it makes a ton of sense. And while I think there's obviously some question about whether he would return to the Mets, money talks, okay? And the Mets, I don't believe they care about their payroll this year. They're so far past the luxury tax. Now, Steve Cohen's going to be willing to blow through it. There's no bad 1-year deal for the Mets. So last year, Justin Turner, I believe he made like 12, 13 million with the Red Sox, something along those lines. If you give him a $20 million offer, which sounds crazy, but just hear me out. Let's just say his best offer is, 17 million to go back to the Red Sox. And you outbid them. I mean, you might have to outbid them to that extent, but I'm just throwing out a number that wouldn't matter to Steve Cohen, right? I feel like you could get him. And I think he would buy into that mentorship role. He did that last year with the Red Sox, great clubhouse guy, and someone that I think really improves the ceiling of your team. Again, he would be one of the best hitters on this team. If the Mets went out and they signed Michael A. Taylor and Justin Turner, think it plugs a lot of holes for them. In the outfield, you'd have Nimmo, Marte, Stewart, and Taylor. That's a pretty good start. And McNeil always ready to step in with Drew Gilbert weighing in the wings of the minors. You have Alonso, McNeil, Lindor, Beatty in the infield, Justin Turner at DH and giving you third base insurance. Mark Vientos off the bench, also getting plenty of running at bat still. Michael A. Taylor as your fourth outfielder, maybe platooning with DJ Stewart in left field. Joey Wendell, your defensive insurance policy at all the infield positions. And then your backup catcher, if that ends up being Omar Narvaez. So it makes a lot of sense. I think the team probably doesn't have the highest ceiling, of course. It's not a team that's going to blow you away on paper, but it's a team that's good enough. If the Mets are sort of aiming to be, a 86 win team and sneak into the playoffs, I think that's a roster that's good enough to get you there, especially when you could get a lift midseason from any of those kids in AA or AAA that might force their way up. So, and I think it leaves a lot of room open for that to happen still, because again, it doesn't clog up second base. And, in the outfield, you can always slide McNeil out there if you needed to, because who knows how many games you're going to get out of Starling Marte. And, same thing goes with DJ Stewart, which is again why Michael A. Taylor makes a ton of sense as well, to give you insurance with two injury-prone guys already in the starting lineup. And a guy that, again, started at center field for a really good team in the Twins last year, and was a huge reason why they had so much success. I mean, he went out and he did a great job in the outfield, and he crushed left-handed pitching. And even though he wasn't great against righties, he still popped 12 home runs against them. So it's not like he was a dud when he was out there against righties. And you look at his season last 3 years, really, he's been between a 1.5 and a 2-win player. He was a 2.1 win player in 2021, 1.5 in 2022 when it came to his F4, and 1.7 with the Twins last season. And he played, over 120 games in each of those 3 years. So, guy that I think would be durable, gives you a good glove in the outfield. He makes a lot of sense. And then Justin Turner is a big bat you can actually slide into your lineup, who might provide some insurance for Pete Alonso if you want to bat right against each other, or insurance to Jeff McNeil if he's batting behind Alonso, or however they decide to line things up. But I think Justin Turner at this point is becoming almost a necessity, because again, the alternative options just aren't great. So I don't know what offers he has out there, but if I'm the Mets, I'm circling Justin Turner after this injury. I'm doing my intel to figure out what the market sort of is on Turner, and I'm coming in higher than that on a 1-year deal, maybe even a 1-year deal with the club option or a mutual option for the following season. And I'm getting the guy because I feel like he would be the perfect fit for what they now need. I mean, he always made a little bit of sense to be your DH option, but when you had Mauricio as well, you felt like, all right, the kids could sort of handle those two spots if need be. Or maybe you get that bat first guy for the outfield. Now I think the bat first guy in the outfield is DJ Stewart. I think Michael A. Taylor would be the glove first guy you need to add, because they're just too thin in that department. And Turner is the best bat I think they can add in this market. Obviously, you can go out and you can sign JD Martinez, who's better than Justin Turner, but he gives you no positional flexibility. Justin Turner, you can stick at first base when Alonso needs a breather. You can put him at third base in a pinch as well. And I honestly think he's better at both of those positions defensively, even at 39 years old, than Mark Vientos is. Although I will give Vientos a shout out, because he went to Puerto Rico. Francisco Lindor extended an invitation to all the young guys. And as far as we know, Vientos is the one guy that took him up on it, went to Puerto Rico and was doing defensive drills with, the best shortstop in baseball. So I do applaud him on his effort. I hope he shows up a new defender and really shocks us, because, that job's wide open. And if Vientos didn't feel that way before, after this injury, he certainly feels that way even more so, right? Because, he's got to think now, all right, it's Beatty and Wendell. I can win this job. And maybe he can. So I'm excited to see how it all plays out. It sucks that Ronny Mauricio is, off the table for this year. I'm hoping he has a speedy recovery, he can get back to himself, and we'll just see how the Mets respond. But I hope they do respond to do something, and they don't just say, all right, we're still good, because I think that would be a pretty big mistake. Anyway, that's going to be all for today's edition of Locked On Mets. As always, thank you for listening. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. And also, if you want to become a Locked On Mets insider, you can find a link in the episode description or go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. Check out Locked On Sports today, the first ever 24/7 streaming channel covering everything in the world of sports with our local experts on each team and our league-wide experts covering each sport. You can find Locked On Sports today on YouTube, streaming 24/7.